Subscribe to the channel and leave a comment right now if you care about the real mechanics of war, not the watered-down versions, because what we're about to unpack is one of the most overlooked survival and engineering disciplines of the Second World War. It is rarely taught properly, almost never explained from a practical standpoint, and yet it saved entire units, cities, and supply lines. This is not about aesthetics. This is about survival under total war, and why the forgotten art of WWII military deception and camouflage stands as one of the most intelligent engineering achievements of the modern era. This forgotten art was not decoration. It was a weapon designed to bend enemy perception. When people hear the word art in a military context, they often think of propaganda posters or morale paintings. That misunderstanding is exactly why this subject remains underestimated. During WWII, camouflage and deception were treated as applied engineering sciences. They involved physics, geometry, psychology, materials science, and logistics, all merged into one discipline, whose sole purpose was to manipulate what the enemy believed to be real. Engineers worked alongside sculptors, architects, stage designers, and physicists to construct illusions that could withstand aerial reconnaissance, ground observation, and even close inspection. Why WWII? Camouflage engineering worked when modern observers underestimate it. At its core, this art exploited predictable weaknesses in human perception. Reconnaissance pilots, artillery observers, and intelligence officers were trained to look for patterns, symmetry, shadows, and movement. WWII deception engineers designed structures that deliberately broke or redirected those expectations. A fake tank did not need to be perfect. It needed to look correct from the distance, altitude, and angle the enemy would observe it. Engineers calculated viewing angles, light reflection, and shadow length at specific times of day. This meant that a plywood tank, properly shaped and positioned, could draw bombs away from real armored divisions. How entire fake armies were built using minimal resources. One of the clearest examples is the creation of phantom forces. Inflatable tanks, wooden artillery pieces, canvas trucks, and false airfields were constructed using cheap materials and rapid assembly techniques. These were not random decoys. They were placed according to realistic operational logic, with supply routes, vehicle tracks pressed into the soil, fake radio traffic transmitted at believable intervals, and even staged troop movements. Engineers understood that deception failed if it lacked consistency. To apply this knowledge today, the lesson is simple but powerful. Realism is not about detail, it is about coherence. Whether building a survival shelter, a concealed cache, or a defensive position, it must fit logically into its environment, or it will attract attention. The role of shadow, shape, and texture in battlefield survival is, well, absolutely crucial. During the Second World War, camouflage engineers paid obsessive attention to shadow, because you see, shadows reveal structure far more quickly than color ever could. They would flatten edges, break up straight lines, and layer textures to disrupt any recognizable forms. A gun emplacement, for instance, wasn't hidden by covering it entirely, but by reshaping its silhouette so that, frankly, the human brain just failed to identify it as a weapon. In practical terms today, this means understanding how your shelter or equipment casts shadows at different times of day. You might test this by observing a structure at sunrise and sunset, making adjustments to angles and overhangs to soften those sharp outlines. This principle honestly applies just as much to modern concealment, to avoiding being photographed, and to moving with low visibility. Now let's talk about how terrain was manipulated as part of the illusion. Another rather forgotten element was terrain engineering. Fake roads were sometimes carved into fields, while real roads were erased or cleverly disguised. Engineers would alter hedgerows, riverbanks, and embankments, all to guide the enemy's interpretation of the landscape. Sometimes a supply depot wasn't hidden by concealment at all, but by making the surrounding terrain appear completely unsuitable for logistics. The lesson here is a bit counterintuitive, but really essential. Sometimes, the safest approach isn't to hide yourself, but to reshape the environment so nobody expects you to be there in the first place. For survivalists, this means choosing locations that naturally discourage attention, and then reinforcing that narrative with minimal, subtle changes to the environment. Why did deception engineering save more lives than armor in some campaigns? Well, in several operations, deception actually absorbed enemy fire that would have otherwise destroyed real units. Bombs fell on fake airfields, while real runways, remained fully operational. Artillery shelled decoy positions while infantry advanced elsewhere. This is engineering as force multiplication, plain and simple. One well-designed illusion could neutralize an enemy advantage without firing a single shot. The practical takeaway here is efficiency. In survival planning, distraction and misdirection often outperform brute strength. Creating false indicators of activity, movement, or presence can, quite literally, buy you time, space, and safety. The disciplined process behind building believable illusions, well, it might surprise you. Contrary to popular belief, this was not improvised guesswork. Engineers followed a methodical process. First, they studied enemy observation methods. Second, they defined what the enemy expected to see. Third, they built only what was necessary to satisfy that expectation. You can apply this step-by-step logic today by asking who might observe you, from where and for how long. Then design only what is required to shape that observer's conclusion. Overbuilding increases detection risk. Precision reduces it. Why does this WWII art still matter for modern survival and resilience? In an age of sensors, drones, and satellites, the human brain is, well, still part of the detection chain. Pattern recognition has not changed. The principles developed during WWII still underpin modern military deception doctrines. For civilians and survivalists, these lessons translate into smarter concealment, better site selection, and improved operational security. Understanding how perception is engineered gives you control over how others interpret your presence or absence. This forgotten WWII art was not about trickery for its own sake. It was disciplined, scientific, and brutally practical. It saved lives by shaping enemy decisions before bullets were ever fired. That is why it deserves to be remembered, not as a curiosity, but as one of the most intelligent engineering achievements of the war. If this deep dive gave you a new perspective on wartime engineering and survival strategy, subscribe to the channel, share this video with someone who takes history seriously, and leave a comment with the aspect of WWII deception you want explored next.